the blustering about Blumenthal. Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop in every week. Dick Blumenthal made national news this week, but not the kind that a candidate for Senate relishes. He is accused of misrepresenting, on some occasions, his military service in Vietnam. Blumenthal and his defenders, including a corps of veterans, say he misspoke, and the accuracy of his military service was never in doubt. We'll talk about the fallout with Hartford Courant Capitol Bureau Chief Chris Keating and Adrienne Fulco, Director of the Public Policy and Law Program at Trinity College. In our second segment, we'll get some insight from some local lawyers about the Eddie Perez corruption trial. How are things going for the Hartford mayor? Then we'll wrap things up with some advice for those of you dealing with the care of elderly parents. But first, Dick Blumenthal on the ropes is reeling. Adrienne Fulco, Chris Keating. Bombshell happens this week. The fallout, we tape on Wednesday. The conventions are on the weekend. But what is the fallout now from this with Blumenthal?
Well, it's a very big deal. I mean, it's been picked up all over the country. I would not rule Blumenthal out yet. It's still very early, but it's a huge, huge story that's being picked up everywhere nationally. If you turn on CNN or MSNBC, it's all over the place. And this was from a guy who was far ahead in the polls. Okay, let's take a look at the actual clip that got him in trouble in Norwalk in 2008 in regards to his military service in Vietnam. Take a look.
We have learned something very important since the days that I served in Vietnam.
You and I served during the Vietnam era. I never had to go to Vietnam, but I wore the uniform and proudly.
All right, so you have that where he's saying there he wore the uniform and proudly just 10 weeks ago. What's the big deal? Maybe the man did misspeak. Adrienne Fulco? Is it overkill?
I think it's very possible that he misspoke, but in this political environment, I don't know if it matters, at least at the moment. And if you look at the polling just today, clearly the public thinks it matters a great deal. That surprise, Keating, the polling showing that the race now narrowing if he races against McMahon from WWE, that the polls are 3%, 2%. That surprise you?
Yeah, and a little bit, yes, but McMahon is constantly on television. You have to remember she's already spent $16 million of her own money, so it's a combination of McMahon being on television really constantly, more than any other candidate, and certainly more than Blumenthal, plus this, putting that together makes the race very close.
I'm a little surprised. I'll be honest. I'm very surprised by the fallout and the reaction. I mean, Blumenthal has been a political icon here in Connecticut. I don't think anyone has ever intimated that he was juicing up his military record. I mean, it just seems to me that it's much to do about nothing.
Well, I guess what I would say, and I think this is really the problem for Blumenthal, that it might not have been for someone else, is that his brand is kind of truth, justice in the American way, that he is honorable, that he is honest, that he's squeaky clean. And I think at least the immediate reaction to this is that the brand has really been undermined. In other words, that's what he stands for. I'm not sure another politician would have had quite the same reaction from the public.
But now who's really reacting? It seems to me that those who favor Blumenthal will be voting for him anyways. Those who didn't like him will not vote for him. It's that group in the middle. How big is that group, Keating, you think?
Yeah, it's the undecideds and the independents in the middle on how this will play. The original tape that we saw that you showed, apparently there's a broader tape in which he did not misspeak, and there are many, many instances where he did not misspeak. But in this instance, he did. So I'm sure there's probably research out there trying to find other videotapes. Believe me, I'm sure the McMahon campaign and anybody else involved in this is certainly looking for other tapes. But even Rob Simmons said, who was a veteran from Vietnam, CIA officer, et cetera, said that he had never heard Blumenthal misspeak at any event that they were at, et cetera.
Yeah, and I also think it's the fact that it broke on the pages of the New York Times. I think if it had been a more local story, I'm not sure it would have had quite the same impact.
That's a very good point. And on the heels of the convention. So the timing and placement, very good point, Ms. Fulco. That's
Yeah,
right.
It would not have had the national impact. People at CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they all read the New York Times. That spurs the national impact, and Politico and Hardball and all those things, no doubt.
Because with these things, you look at intent. What would be, if indeed he was deliberately trying to be deceptive with his record, what would be the intent? I mean, he didn't need any more poll numbers. So you have to look and say, well, what's the motive? If indeed he was going to go there, why would he do it? And that's what's so baffling to me about the story.
I mean, look, he's talking to an audience. Two ways of looking at it, that he did, in fact, misspeak. Or two, you're there with the veterans and you just get carried away. I mean, I can't pretend to get inside his head, but I think the other problem for some people is that this is one of the most cautious, careful politicians in the state, probably in the country. And I think that also, it just doesn't seem to fit who we think this person is.
Mm-hmm. Also, things of this nature are more common than you think. There was a story this week. A kid got into Hartford, said he had perfect SAT scores. So this, and people who said they were in Vietnam or they did this or did that. I won't say it's relatively common, but it's more common than you think.
And we live in an age where every word now you're responsible for.
It's measured, right? Exactly.
In other words, and that there are people recording our words when we don't even know they're being recorded. I mean, I think about this in my classroom sometimes. Who's recording something and I may not even know it. So I think that also has had an effect because they obviously didn't know this was out there. But
yet, you know, some of the veterans out there who said, listen, we've seen Blumenthal for years. He's come to all our events. We support him. Let's hear what they had to say, some of the actual veterans.
Through the toughest times, Dick Blumenthal has always been there for us. But this man has been in my heart since I've been in Connecticut.
You know, when you're weighing this thing, and not every veteran feels the same way. There are plenty of veterans who were taken aback by some of his misstatements. But there you have a core of, military guys saying, we know Dick Blumenthal. We don't think he's being deceptive. This story is a non-story.
Yeah, well, one of the big things is in the age of videotape, Blumenthal could literally go to 100 veterans events and misspeak at 2
right.
and not at 98. And in the age of video, you will get those 2 events or those 3 events out of 100. So we'll have to see what happens on this. It's a little hard to predict in the same way people wouldn't have predicted that this was going to happen.
She's asking you predictions.
What do you think?
Keating does good predictions. But put him on the spot, right?
I really don't know. In other words, how this will turn out.
How's the rebound from this?
It's a long way to November. That's the thing to remember.
Right. And there are, I'm sure there is opposition research on the other side as well. So, again, we live in an age where we don't know what the news is going to be tomorrow.
Well, the real story is now we have a horse race, apparently, right? What was thought to be sort of a giveaway race, you now have a very intriguing race brewing here in Connecticut.
And lots of money. I mean, there was money before. I can just see even more money coming in now.
All right, real quick, another big story. Susan Byswitch, out of the loop. I've never seen a story quite like this. Here she's running for governor, considered a leading candidate. Then Blumenthal decides to go for senator. She goes for AG, and now the Supreme Court rules that she doesn't have the legal background to run, so she's out for both races, each of which she probably would have won.
Right, in an incredibly tight time span. Basically,
right.
on New Year's Day, she's leading for governor. Martin Luther King Day, she's leading for Senate, Attorney General. And now her future is in doubt as to exactly what will happen.
Have you ever seen anything like this, Rennie?
No, I don't understand it because I don't understand how that detail was overlooked. Again, somebody who's careful and cautious. So I do not have an explanation.
Was it a good ruling? There was some school of thought to let the public decide. Go ahead and let her run. Let the people decide if they want her there or not. What do you think of the Supreme Court ruling?
Well, once they went to court, I don't think the Supreme Court had a choice. They had to make a ruling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
But they had a choice to say, you know what, we'll uphold what the other court did or the judge did. They could have made that choice.
Well, I think I think they believe that they came to the right decision in terms of what the law actually says.
A bizarre story there, right? Here she is now on the sidelines out of 2 races.
Right.
And certainly at the lower court level, judges very often don't want to get involved in politics.
Right.
But when you have 7 people on the state Supreme Court, they don't mind it. But generally, judges don't want to get involved in these things at all.
Okay, Rennie Fulco, Chris Keating. When we come back, we have a bevy of barristers to give you their thoughts on the corruption trial of Eddie Perez. You are watching The Stan Simpson Show. Don't go away.